For years, I had cultivated an identity within our quiet suburban enclave, one that brought me immense personal satisfaction. I was, by all accounts, the quintessential go-to neighbor. It wasn't a title I sought out actively, but rather one that organically blossomed from my genuine desire to contribute to the fabric of our community. My garden, a vibrant tapestry of seasonal delights, often yielded more than my family could consume, and so, baskets brimming with sun-ripened tomatoes, crisp lettuce, or fragrant herbs would frequently find their way onto doorsteps up and down the street. It was a small gesture, perhaps, but one that always elicited warm smiles and appreciative nods, reinforcing my belief in the inherent goodness of shared living. Beyond the bounty of the earth, my services extended to the more practical, yet equally vital, aspects of neighborhood life. When the millers next door embarked on their annual summer pilgrimage to the coast, it was my porch light that remained on, my watchful eyes that scanned their property, and my hands that diligently watered their prize-winning petunias. Their fluffy Persian cat, Mittens, a creature of discerning tastes and even more discerning bladder control, knew my back door as well as her own, often greeting me with an imperious meow as I arrived for her morning feeding. Pet-sitting wasn't a chore, it was an extension of my care, a way to alleviate the anxieties of my friends and allow them to truly unwind. And then there were the unexpected emergencies, the little hiccups of daily life that inevitably arise. A forgotten key, a burst pipe, an unexpected delivery. My phone was often the first one rung, and I prided myself on being there, ready with a spare key, a quick fix, or simply a reassuring presence. I saw it as a reciprocal relationship, a silent pact of mutual support that underpinned the tranquility of our street. This wasn't just a collection of houses, it was a community, a living, breathing entity where help was a given, and kindness was currency. I genuinely believed I had found my place, a haven where the simple act of being a good neighbor was not only valued but celebrated. There was a deep, quiet joy in knowing I was a reliable pillar, a trusted confidant, someone who could be counted on. This sense of belonging, of contributing meaningfully to my immediate world, was a cornerstone of my happiness. It felt right, it felt good, and I truly thought this harmonious existence would continue indefinitely. Little did I know, the foundations of this cherished belief were about to be severely tested, and the very definition of neighborly would soon be twisted beyond recognition. The first whispers of discord, subtle at first, began to ripple through the otherwise placid waters of our street, slowly eroding the sense of communal harmony I had so carefully nurtured. It all revolved around a seemingly innocuous, yet increasingly contentious, issue: our cars. My family, like many modern households, had accumulated a small fleet of vehicles, each serving a distinct purpose, a testament to the varied lives we led. There was my son's primary daily driver, a sturdy sedan that ferried him to work and back, currently sidelined by an unfortunate fender bender and awaiting parts for repair. Then there was his passion project, a classic muscle car, lovingly restored piece by painstaking piece, but for now, a beautiful shell, utterly undrivable, patiently awaiting a specialized engine component. My own car, a reliable SUV, had recently spent a week in the shop for a routine but lengthy maintenance overhaul. This confluence of automotive circumstances meant that for a temporary period, we found ourselves with a few extra vehicles. To bridge the gap, my son had a loaner car from the body shop, and I, too, was driving a temporary vehicle while mine was being serviced. The result? Our driveway, usually accommodating 2 cars comfortably, was overflowing, necessitating that a couple of these temporary or disabled vehicles occupy spots on the street. In our neighborhood, this was far from an anomaly. There was no homeowners association, no restrictive covenants dictating parking arrangements. Our street was a vibrant, lived-in space where cars frequently lined the curbs, a common sight in a community built on older, larger lots without the strictures of modern, tightly controlled developments. We had always understood this to be the unwritten rule: if there's space, it's fair game. And we weren't just silently imposing. We were transparent. To anyone who inquired, we offered a brief, polite explanation of the situation. The repairs, the loaners, the temporary nature of it all. Most neighbors, understanding the ebb and flow of family life, simply nodded, perhaps offering a sympathetic word about the inconvenience of car troubles. I genuinely believed that our openness, coupled with the neighborhood's relaxed parking norms, would prevent any friction. After all, We were talking about a few extra feet of curb space, not a permanent blight on the landscape. The first hint that this understanding wasn't universal came from a neighbor I'll call Mr. Henderson, a man known for his meticulously manicured lawn and an almost pathological need for order. He approached me one afternoon, a strained smile on his face, and in a tone that was far too polite to be truly benign, offered to help out by paying to have my son's hobby car towed. My son's hobby car. The one that was parked squarely in our own driveway, not even on the street. The audacity of the suggestion, the sheer presumption, took me aback. I managed a tight smile, brushed it off as a misunderstanding, and politely declined, explaining that it was a project car and perfectly fine where it was. I tried to rationalize it away, telling myself that Mr. Henderson was just a bit eccentric, perhaps overly concerned with aesthetics. It was an isolated incident, I thought, a minor blip. But a tiny seed of unease had been planted, a faint tremor in the foundation of my perceived community harmony. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting, subtly, imperceptibly, beneath the surface of our peaceful street. And I was about to discover just how drastically that shift would impact my life. The incident with Mr. Henderson, while unsettling, felt like an isolated anomaly, easily dismissed as the quirk of a particularly fastidious individual. I compartmentalized it, tucking it away as a minor annoyance, convinced that the vast majority of my neighbors understood and appreciated the give and take of community living. But then, Emily entered the picture, and what began as a ripple of unease transformed into a crashing wave of betrayal. Emily was not just any neighbor. She was one of the people I had gone above and beyond for, consistently, for years. Her kids had often been beneficiaries of my garden's bounty, her pets had been cared for in my home, and I had even helped her navigate a complex insurance claim after a minor accident, spending hours on the phone on her behalf. She was, in my estimation, a friend, someone I had invested in emotionally and practically. The first volley from Emily came weeks after the Mr. Henderson encounter, a terse, aggressive message pinging on my phone. It was late afternoon, and I was just winding down from a busy day. The text was jarring, accusatory, and completely out of character for the Emily I thought I knew. "Tell your son to move his car now," it read, followed by an angry string of emojis. "It's blocking my driveway. This is unacceptable." My brow furrowed in confusion. My son's car, the daily driver, was still in the shop, and his project car was, as always, tucked safely in our driveway. Neither of them was anywhere near Emily's property, let alone blocking her driveway. I reread the message, trying to make sense of the sudden fury. I immediately typed out a polite, clarifying response. "Hi Emily, I'm a bit confused. Neither of my son's cars are parked near your driveway. Are you sure it's one of ours? Perhaps you're mistaken." I waited, expecting a quick apology, a sheepish acknowledgement of her error. But no response came. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, for hours, then days. It was uncharacteristic of her to leave a message unanswered, especially one she had initiated with such vehemence. The lack of follow-up, the refusal to engage in a simple clarification, left a sour taste in my mouth. It felt less like a genuine complaint and more like an unprovoked attack, a shot fired from the dark without bothering to confirm the target. I tried to dismiss it, to tell myself she was having a bad day, or perhaps had sent the message to the wrong person. But the lingering feeling of injustice persisted. Why would she accuse me so vehemently without even checking her facts? Why the immediate jump to anger? It didn't sit right. The incident gnawed at me, a tiny splinter under the skin of my otherwise peaceful existence. I had always prided myself on open communication, on resolving issues directly and calmly. Emily's approach, however, felt like a deliberate avoidance of resolution, a preference for accusation over clarification. It was the first crack in the facade of our friendship, a hint that the foundation might not be as solid as I had always believed. And the true extent of that damage was about to be revealed, not by Emily, but by my son. The unresolved tension from Emily's accusatory message lingered, a low hum of discomfort beneath the surface of my daily life. I tried to push it aside, to focus on the myriad other demands of family and home, but the unanswered text, the unexplained anger, continued to prick at my mind. Then, a few days later, my son came home, his face a mixture of bewilderment and frustration. He walked into the kitchen, tossed his keys onto the counter with an uncharacteristic thud, and let out a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of 100 grievances. "Mom," he started, his voice laced with annoyance, "you're not going to believe what just happened." My heart immediately sank. I had a premonition, a cold certainty, that this conversation was directly linked to Emily's earlier outburst. "Emily," he continued, confirming my suspicion, "just totally laid into me about a car blocking her driveway. She was furious, yelling about how inconsiderate we are, how we're ruining the street, all this crazy stuff." I felt a surge of protectiveness, a fierce maternal instinct to defend my son against what I knew was an unfounded accusation. "What? She actually confronted you? After I tried to message her about it?" I asked, my voice rising in disbelief. "Yes. And I tried to tell her, Mom, I really did," he explained, running a hand through his hair. "I told her neither of my cars were parked there, that my daily driver was still at the shop, and the project car was in our driveway. I even pointed out the car she was talking about wasn't ours. But she just wouldn't listen. It was like she had already made up her mind. She just kept cutting me off, repeating the same accusations. It was so weird, like she wasn't even hearing me." My blood began to simmer. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate refusal to engage with facts, a willful ignorance. Emily had not only accused me via text, ignored my attempt at clarification, but had then gone directly to my son, doubling down on her baseless claims, refusing to listen to his perfectly reasonable explanation. The sheer unfairness of it, the aggressive and dismissive way she had treated him, infuriated me. My son, always the calm and logical one, had been subjected to an unwarranted tirade. "So, whose car was it then?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even, though I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. My son shrugged. "It was Tom's. You know, Tom from down the street. He had parked it there temporarily. I think he even got approval in the group chat for it, because his driveway was getting repaved or something." The pieces clicked into place, revealing the full extent of Emily's egregious error. Not only was the car not ours, but it belonged to another neighbor, Tom, who had taken the proper steps to ensure his temporary parking wouldn't cause an issue. The irony was almost laughable, if it weren't so infuriating. Emily, the self-appointed arbiter of neighborhood parking etiquette, had completely misidentified the culprit, then refused to listen to reason from either me or my son. It wasn't just a mistake, it was a character flaw, a rush to judgment combined with a stubborn refusal to admit fault. The image of Emily as a friend, as someone deserving of my help and kindness, began to shatter. The cracks were no longer just visible. They were widening, revealing a deeply unpleasant truth beneath. And I knew, with a growing sense of dread, that this was far from over. The revelation that the offending vehicle belonged to Tom, a neighbor who had even sought group chat approval for his temporary parking, solidified my growing annoyance into something more potent, a simmering indignation. Emily's behavior wasn't just a simple mistake. It was a cascade of errors compounded by a baffling refusal to acknowledge reality. She had jumped to conclusions, launched a baseless attack, ignored my attempts at clarification, and then, most egregiously, verbally accosted my son, dismissing his truthful explanation with a wave of her hand. It was a pattern of behavior that spoke volumes about her character, and none of it was flattering. Despite the surge of anger I felt, my initial instinct, honed by years of being the go-to neighbor, was still to minimize drama, to smooth things over. My immediate concern shifted from Emily's unfairness to the potential for wider neighborhood friction. If Emily was this volatile, this prone to misidentification and aggressive confrontation, who else might she target? I didn't want Tom, who had done everything by the book, to suffer the brunt of her misplaced fury. So, I picked up my phone and called Tom directly. "Hey Tom, it's my name," I began, trying to keep my voice light, though my jaw was tight. "Listen, I just wanted to give you a heads up. My son just told me Emily confronted him about your car being parked near her driveway. Apparently, she thought it was ours." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end. Then, Tom's voice, laced with genuine surprise, came through the receiver. "What? Emily? She said something to your son. But I talked to her about it weeks ago. When I asked in the group chat, She was one of the first ones to say it was fine for a few days while my driveway was being sealed. She literally messaged me directly saying no problem at all, happy to help. My eyes widened. The layers of Emily's deception and hypocrisy were peeling back, one by one, revealing an increasingly ugly picture. Not only had she known it was Tom's car, not only had she explicitly given him permission, but she had actively lied about it, first to me, then to my son. The anger intensified, a hot flush spreading across my face. This wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was a calculated act of malice, a deliberate attempt to create conflict where none existed, and to shift blame onto my family. "Well, she certainly didn't mention that to us," I said, my voice now tight with suppressed fury. She was absolutely furious with my son, refusing to listen to him. She really gave him an earful. Tom, clearly mortified and wanting no part in the brewing storm, was quick to act. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. That's completely out of line. I'll move it right now. I don't want any trouble." He sounded genuinely apologetic, a stark contrast to Emily's belligerence. Within minutes, I saw his car being repositioned further down the street, away from Emily's property. The immediate crisis was averted. Tom's car was moved, and the direct cause of Emily's fury was gone. But the more I thought about it, the more the initial relief curdled into a bitter resentment. I had gone through all this trouble, mediating, clarifying, making calls, all to clean up Emily's self-made mess. I had absorbed her anger, defended my son, and now even facilitated the resolution of a problem that had never been ours to begin with. The injustice of it all began to fester, slowly transforming my annoyance into a deep, cold anger. The go-to neighbor, the one who always smoothed things over, was starting to feel like a doormat. And the desire for peace was rapidly being eclipsed by a powerful, unfamiliar urge for something else entirely. The immediate aftermath of Tom moving his car brought a superficial calm to the street, but within me, a storm was brewing. The quiet satisfaction I usually derived from resolving neighborhood issues was conspicuously absent, replaced by a churning vortex of indignation. I had, once again, played the role of the peacemaker, the problem solver, the one who smoothed over ruffled feathers. Yet, this time, the feathers weren't just ruffled. They had been deliberately plucked, and the person doing the plucking was Emily, someone I had consistently gone out of my way to help. The more I replayed the sequence of events in my mind, her initial furious text, her stony silence when I tried to clarify, her aggressive confrontation with my son, her outright refusal to listen to his explanation, and then the damning revelation from Tom that she had not only known about his car but had explicitly approved its parking, the more the pieces of a deeply unsettling puzzle clicked into place. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a bad day. This was something far more insidious. Emily was clearly projecting. Her anger, her accusations, her need to find fault, it wasn't about a car, or parking, or even genuine inconvenience. It was about something within her, something she was struggling with, and my family, specifically our temporary car situation, had become the convenient scapegoat. We were the easy target, the visible manifestation of whatever internal frustrations she harbored. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I had been taken advantage of. Not just once, but repeatedly, over years. All those times I had gone above and beyond for her, the pet sitting, the garden produce, the hours spent on her insurance claim, they hadn't built a foundation of mutual respect or friendship. They had, instead, created an expectation, a sense of entitlement on her part, and a vulnerability on mine. I was the reliable one, the helpful one, the one who would always bend over backward. And now, I was her new target. The anger, initially a slow burn, began to flare. It wasn't just about the parking incident anymore. It was about the years of one-sided generosity, the emotional labor I had invested, only to be repaid with baseless accusations and outright hostility. It felt like a profound betrayal, a shattering of the trust one had so freely given. My joy in being the go-to neighbor, the very identity I had cultivated and cherished, felt utterly shattered. The idea of offering help, of extending kindness, now felt like a naive folly, an open invitation for exploitation. The warmth I once felt for our community began to chill, replaced by a cold cynicism. I knew I couldn't let it stand. The injustice was too great, the personal affront too deep. I had to confront her, not just for the parking, but for the principle of it all. I took a deep breath, my fingers trembling slightly as I opened my messaging app. This time, there would be no polite inquiries, no gentle clarifications. This time, I would be direct. I would lay out the facts, expose her hypocrisy, and demand an explanation for her inexplicable behavior. I typed out the message, each word a deliberate strike against the illusion of our friendship, against the years of her taking and my giving. I was ready for a response, an apology, some form of acknowledgement. What I received, however, was far more explosive than I could have ever anticipated. With a resolve I hadn't known I possessed, I crafted the message to Emily. My usual inclination to soften blows, to mediate, was entirely absent. This was not about diplomacy. It was about truth and accountability. I laid out the facts, stark and unembellished. Emily, I began, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I'm messaging you because I'm incredibly disappointed by your behavior. You accused my son and me of blocking your driveway, when in fact, it was Tom's car. Not only that, but Tom confirmed you gave him explicit permission to park there weeks ago. You then confronted my son, refusing to listen to his explanation, and ignored my attempts to clarify the situation. I paused, rereading the words, ensuring they conveyed the precise blend of disappointment and firm accusation I intended. This wasn't an invitation for debate, it was a statement of fact, a challenge to her blatant dishonesty. I hit send, a strange mix of trepidation and grim satisfaction washing over me. I braced myself for a response, perhaps a defensive retort, or, if I dared to hope, a belated, albeit grudging, apology. What I received was an immediate, unhinged explosion. Her reply came back almost instantly, a furious volley of messages that confirmed my worst suspicions about her true character. The carefully constructed facade of the polite, appreciative neighbor crumbled completely, revealing a raw, ugly core of resentment and hostility. Suddenly, the parking incident was no longer the issue. It was merely the match that lit a much larger, more volatile fire. Oh, so now it's my fault. Her first message shrieked, all caps indicating the fury behind the words. Don't you dare try to turn this around on me. This isn't about one car, it's about you. It's about you people having too many cars. Your street looks like a junkyard. It's an eyesore. You're bringing down the whole neighborhood. My jaw dropped. The sheer audacity, the immediate pivot from a specific, provable lie to a broad, sweeping condemnation, left me momentarily speechless. The goalposts had not just been moved, they had been entirely obliterated. This wasn't about a blocked driveway, it was about a deep-seated animosity she had apparently harbored for some time, an animosity she had skillfully concealed behind a veneer of neighborly pleasantries. The messages continued to pour in, a torrent of venomous accusations. You're bad neighbors. Inconsiderate. You think you can just do whatever you want because you've been here forever. You're selfish. You don't care about anyone else. Each word was a dagger, aimed directly at the heart of the identity I had so carefully cultivated, the helpful, caring, community-minded individual. She attacked my character, my family, even the very presence of our vehicles, twisting every aspect into a personal failing. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. This was the woman whose cat I had nursed through a difficult illness, whose children I had driven to school in a pinch, whose house I had watched countless times. All those acts of kindness, all those gestures of support, were now being thrown back at me, not as evidence of my good intentions, but as proof of some imagined transgression. The sheer nastiness of her words, the vitriol, was shocking. It was clear that any attempt at rational discussion was futile. She wasn't interested in truth or reconciliation. She was interested in unleashing a torrent of pent-up rage, using our cars as a convenient excuse. The finality of her words, the absolute certainty of her condemnation, left me reeling. I felt a profound sense of defeat, a crushing weight of disillusionment. Years of genuine effort, of pouring my heart into being a good neighbor, had culminated in this ugly, baseless attack. The joy I once felt in being the go-to person, the sense of purpose and belonging, evaporated in the face of her unbridled hostility. It was a complete and utter repudiation of everything I thought our neighborly relationship stood for. And in that moment, as her hateful words continued to flood my screen, I knew there was only one thing left to do. I blocked her. The digital barrier felt like a small, inadequate shield against the emotional assault, but it was a start. The era of the good neighbor was over. Blocking Emily felt like a necessary, albeit symbolic, act of self-preservation. The torrent of her vitriol had been overwhelming, a toxic flood that threatened to drown me in its baseless accusations. The digital barrier I erected between us was a desperate attempt to stem the flow, to regain some semblance of control over my emotional landscape. But even with the immediate onslaught silenced, the echoes of her hateful words reverberated in my mind, a relentless drumbeat of betrayal and disillusionment. Bad neighbors. Inconsiderate. Selfish. Her words, sharp and precise, had struck at the very core of my identity. For years, I had defined myself, in part, by my role within this community. I was the one who shared, who helped, who always went the extra mile. It wasn't a performance, it was genuinely who I was, a reflection of my values and my belief in the power of interconnectedness. I found genuine joy in these interactions, a deep satisfaction in contributing to the well-being of those around me. To be suddenly, brutally, stripped of that identity, to be branded with the very opposite of what I strived to be, was a profoundly painful experience. The defeat I felt was heavy, a leaden weight in my chest. It wasn't just about Emily. It was about the shattering of an illusion. I had believed in the inherent goodness of our community, in the reciprocal nature of kindness. I had poured my energy, my time, and my emotional resources into building what I thought was a strong, supportive network of neighbors. Now, it felt as though all that effort had been for naught, that my generosity had been mistaken for weakness, my willingness to help for an open invitation to exploit. The realization that I had been taken advantage of, systematically and without remorse, was a bitter pill to swallow. Emily, the recipient of so much of my goodwill, had turned out to be the ultimate betrayer, using my kindness as a weapon against me. The joy, the inherent pleasure I once found in being the go-to neighbor, was utterly shattered. The thought of offering garden produce now felt tainted, a potential prelude to further exploitation. The idea of pet-sitting for anyone, even those I genuinely liked, was met with a cynical internal shrug. Why bother? What was the point of extending myself if this was the ultimate reward? The very fabric of my engagement with the neighborhood, once so vibrant and fulfilling, now felt threadbare and fragile. I felt exposed, vulnerable, and deeply hurt. For a time, this feeling of defeat dominated. I retreated, both physically and emotionally. I avoided eye contact with neighbors, walked a little faster when I saw someone approaching, and kept my garden gate firmly shut. The vibrant community I had once cherished now felt like a minefield, every interaction a potential source of pain. The trust was gone, replaced by a pervasive sense of suspicion. But defeat, for me, was never a permanent state. Beneath the layers of hurt and disillusionment, a new feeling began to stir. It was small at first, a tiny spark in the darkness, but it quickly began to grow, fueled by the injustice of it all. It wasn't the warm glow of community spirit, nor the quiet satisfaction of helpfulness. No, this was something entirely different. It was a cold, hard resolve, born from the ashes of betrayal. It was a desire for something more. Something that would reclaim my agency, redefine my boundaries, and perhaps, just perhaps, offer a taste of poetic justice. The good neighbor was dead. And in her place, a new, more formidable persona was beginning to emerge, one with a mischievous glint in her eye and a very specific plan taking shape in her mind. The initial wave of hurt and defeat slowly began to recede, leaving behind a hard, unyielding core of something entirely new. A desire for petty revenge. It wasn't a noble emotion, perhaps, nor one I had ever consciously entertained before. My life had always been guided by principles of kindness, generosity, and community spirit. But Emily's venomous outburst, her calculated betrayal of years of goodwill, had irrevocably altered my moral landscape. The good neighbor persona, once a source of pride, now felt like a naive costume I had foolishly worn, leaving me exposed and vulnerable to the very people I sought to help. The thought of simply moving on, of letting her baseless accusations fester, was intolerable. It felt like a surrender, an admission that her cruelty had won. And I was not a person who surrendered easily. A quiet resolve began to build, a determination to reclaim my agency, to redefine the narrative she had so aggressively tried to impose. If she wanted a bad neighbor, then by God, she was going to get one. But not in the way she expected. Not with overt hostility or destructive acts. No, my revenge would be subtle, persistent, and utterly, deliciously petty. It would be a constant, gentle prick, a visual reminder of her own unfounded malice, a mirror reflecting her absurdity back at her. The idea formed slowly, a mischievous whisper in the back of my mind that gradually grew into a full-blown plan. It started with a memory of something I had seen online, a fleeting image of suburban rebellion, a symbol of playful defiance. And then, it clicked. Plastic yard flamingos. The quintessential emblem of kitsch, of suburban eccentricity, of a certain kind of unapologetic, slightly tacky charm. They were bright, they were cheerful, and most importantly, they were utterly anathema to the kind of perfectionist aesthetic that Emily and her ilk seemed to champion. The thought brought a genuine, if slightly wicked, smile to my face for the first time in days. The image of Emily, the self-appointed guardian of neighborhood aesthetics, having to gaze upon a flock of garish pink birds every single day filled me with a perverse delight. It was perfect. It wasn't destructive. It wasn't illegal. It wasn't even overtly aggressive. It was simply, their star. A constant, cheerful, undeniable presence that would subtly grate on her nerves, a visual manifestation of the bad neighbor she had so gleefully labeled me. I pulled out my phone, the very device that had delivered her hateful messages, and navigated to an online retailer. My fingers flew across the screen, a new energy coursing through me. I wasn't just ordering lawn ornaments, I was ordering a declaration of independence, a symbol of my refusal to be defined by her negativity. I wasn't going to let her shatter my joy. Instead, I was going to channel this newfound anger into something creative, something that would amuse me and subtly infuriate her. The transaction was complete in moments. A large box of plastic yard flamingos, an army of pink, poised to descend upon my lawn. A sense of anticipation, sharp and exhilarating, replaced the dull ache of betrayal. The go-to neighbor was gone, yes, but a new, more resilient, and perhaps a little bit mischievous, version of myself was emerging from the ashes. I was ready to embrace the role of the bad neighbor she claimed I was, but on my own terms, with a flock of plastic birds as my silent, pink, feathered army. The game, as they say, was officially on. The days that followed the flamingo order were charged with a quiet anticipation. It was a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time, a sense of purpose that transcended the mundane routines of daily life. The hurt from Emily's betrayal still lingered, a dull ache beneath the surface, but it was now overshadowed by a burgeoning excitement, a mischievous glee that bubbled up whenever I thought about the impending arrival of my pink army. I found myself humming as I watered my garden, a small, knowing smile playing on my lips. The garden, once a symbol of my generosity, would now become the stage for my silent rebellion. I meticulously planned their deployment. It wouldn't be a random scattering. No, this required strategy, a careful consideration of sightlines and maximum visual impact. I envisioned them not as mere lawn ornaments, but as sentinels, standing guard over my newly defined boundaries. They would be positioned strategically, not just for my own amusement, but for Emily's undeniable, unavoidable viewing pleasure. I imagined her morning coffee, her gaze drifting across her perfectly manicured lawn, only to be assaulted by a vibrant splash of pink from my property. The thought alone was enough to send a shiver of satisfaction down my spine. The package arrived a few days later, a surprisingly large box that barely fit through my front door. I dragged it inside, a conspiratorial grin spreading across my face. My son, ever observant, raised an eyebrow. "What's in the box, Mom? Looks like you won the lottery or something." I just winked, a secretive smile my only answer. He shrugged, used to my occasional eccentricities, and went about his day, oblivious to the silent war I was about to declare. Inside, nestled amongst layers of protective packaging, were dozens of the brightest, most unapologetically pink plastic flamingos I had ever seen. Their long, slender legs were detached, ready to be inserted into the ground, and their painted eyes seemed to hold a knowing, mischievous glint, mirroring my own. I carefully unpacked each one, arranging them on my living room floor like a general reviewing her troops. There were tall ones, short ones, some with their heads cocked inquisitively, others with their necks elegantly curved. They were, in their own way, magnificent. I decided to wait until dusk for their grand unveiling. The cover of Twilight would add a touch of dramatic flair, ensuring they would be the first thing Emily saw with the morning light. It also gave me time to savor the moment, to fully immerse myself in the delicious anticipation of my petty revenge. I felt a lightness I hadn't felt in weeks, a sense of reclaiming control. This wasn't about being a victim anymore. It was about being an agent of change, albeit a very pink, plastic one. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the neighborhood, I gathered my tools, a small mallet, a measuring tape, and a determined glint in my eye. The air was cool and still, the perfect backdrop for my covert operation. My heart thumped with a mixture of nerves and exhilaration. This was it. The moment of transformation. The moment the go-to neighbor shed her skin and embraced her new, unapologetically bad persona. I stepped out onto my lawn, the box of flamingos clutched in my arms, ready to make my statement. The quiet suburban street was about to get a whole lot pinker. Under the cloak of twilight, with the last vestiges of daylight fading into a soft, bruised purple, I began my operation. The air was still, carrying only the distant chirping of crickets and the rustle of leaves in a gentle breeze. It was the perfect stage for my quiet rebellion. I approached my front lawn, the box of flamingos clutched like a treasure chest, each plastic bird a silent promise of future irritation. My heart beat a steady rhythm against my ribs, a mix of nervous excitement and grim determination. I started near the edge of my property, closest to Emily's house. This was strategic. The first wave of pink would be impossible for her to miss from her kitchen window, her front porch, or even her perfectly manicured driveway. I carefully unwrapped the first flamingo, its vibrant hue almost glowing in the dim light. Its long, slender metal legs clicked into place with a satisfying snap. I knelt, feeling the cool dampness of the grass beneath my knees, and positioned the first sentinel. With a small mallet, I gently tapped its legs into the soft earth, ensuring it stood tall and proud, its painted eye staring defiantly towards Emily's immaculate home. One by one, they rose. A flock of silent, pink sentinels. I worked methodically, spacing them out, creating a visual rhythm that would be both eye-catching and subtly overwhelming. Some were clustered in small family groups, as if engaging in quiet conversation. Others stood alone, solitary figures striking a pose of dignified defiance. I arranged them along the front perimeter of my lawn, then curved them around the side, ensuring a continuous, vibrant display. The sheer number of them, far more than any single lawn would typically boast, was part of the statement. It wasn't just a flamingo, it was a asterisk flock star. A pink invasion. As I worked, a strange sense of liberation washed over me. Each flamingo I placed was a small act of defiance, a silent scream against the injustice I had endured. The hurt and anger that had festered within me began to dissipate, replaced by a growing sense of empowerment. This wasn't about being destructive or mean-spirited in the way Emily had been. This was about reclaiming my space, my peace, and my narrative. It was about turning her baseless accusations into a whimsical, yet undeniably irritating, reality. If I was to be labeled a bad neighbor, then I would embrace the title with a flourish, a touch of theatricality. The process took longer than I anticipated. The sun had long since set, and the streetlights cast a soft, ethereal glow on my burgeoning pink army. My back ached slightly, but I barely noticed. I was too engrossed in my mission, too focused on perfecting the arrangement. Finally, with the last flamingo firmly planted, I stood back, surveying my handiwork. Dozens of plastic birds, their vibrant pink forms a stark contrast against the deepening twilight, stood proudly on my lawn. They looked utterly ridiculous, wonderfully garish, and perfectly, absolutely, gloriously petty. A genuine laugh escaped my lips, a sound I hadn't heard from myself in days. It was a laugh of triumph, of release, of pure, unadulterated mischief. The street was quiet, oblivious to the transformation that had just taken place. But I knew. And soon, Emily would know. The go-to neighbor was gone. In her place stood a woman who had found her own unique way to fight back, armed with nothing but a mallet and an army of plastic flamingos. The first rays of dawn would bring with them a very pink surprise, and I couldn't wait to see it. The next morning dawned with a crisp, clear light, illuminating my front lawn in all its newfound, unapologetically pink glory. I woke earlier than usual, a jolt of anticipation propelling me out of bed. I crept to my window, pulling back the curtain just enough to peek out. The sight that greeted me brought a fresh wave of satisfaction. The flamingos, bathed in the soft morning sun, stood out in stark, vibrant contrast against the green grass. They were impossible to miss. A silent, cheerful, yet undeniably defiant statement. I imagined Emily's morning routine, the gentle clink of her coffee cup, the quiet rustle of her newspaper, perhaps a moment of serene contemplation as she gazed out her window at the perfectly manicured street. And then, her eyes would fall upon my lawn. The sudden, jarring splash of shocking pink. The sheer number of them. The utter audacity of it all. I pictured her initial confusion, then the dawning realization, followed by a slow, simmering rage. The thought alone was a balm to my wounded spirit. I decided to make myself a cup of coffee and sit on my porch, feigning casual enjoyment of the morning, but secretly observing. It wasn't long before the first signs of activity stirred at Emily's house. Her front door opened, and she emerged, presumably to retrieve her newspaper or simply to take in the morning air. Her gaze, as expected, swept across the street. And then, it stopped. Directly on my lawn. I watched, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips, as her posture stiffened. Her head tilted slightly, as if she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. She took a step closer to the edge of her porch, her eyes narrowed, scanning the entire expanse of my flamingo-filled yard. There was a pause, a moment of frozen disbelief, before her shoulders visibly slumped. Then, she let out a small, frustrated huff, audible even from my distance. Her hands went to her hips, and she stood there for a long moment, simply staring, as if willing the pink invasion to disappear. It was glorious. Every huff, every slump of her shoulders, every narrowed glance was a small victory. She didn't yell. She didn't march over. She simply stood there, visibly irritated, trapped in the silent acknowledgement of my playful defiance. She had called me a bad neighbor, and now she had to live with the visual manifestation of that label, a cheerful, kitschy, and utterly unremovable reminder of her own unfounded accusations. After a few minutes of this silent standoff, she turned abruptly and retreated back into her house, slamming the door with a little more force than necessary. The sound was a symphony to my ears. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee, savoring the moment. This wasn't about escalating a conflict. It was about asserting my boundaries, reclaiming my peace, and subtly, yet undeniably, turning her own negativity back on her. The flamingos stood tall and proud, catching the sunlight, their plastic forms radiating an almost palpable sense of cheerful rebellion. They were more than just lawn ornaments. They were a symbol. A symbol that I would not be bullied, that my kindness would not be exploited, and that if someone chose to label me, I would embrace that label on my own terms. The bad neighbor had arrived, and she was fabulous, pink, and here to stay. And this was just the beginning. The simple act of placing those flamingos had opened a door to a new, more resilient me, ready to face whatever came next with a mischievous glint in my eye. The initial satisfaction of Emily's visible irritation was profound, but it was just the first ripple in the pond. I knew that a single morning of flamingo-induced annoyance wouldn't be enough to truly convey my message, nor would it fully satisfy the burgeoning desire for sustained, petty revenge. My goal wasn't just to make her briefly uncomfortable, it was to establish a new normal, a constant, cheerful reminder of her own unfounded malice. The flamingos were a statement, yes, but they also needed to become an enduring fixture, a part of the daily landscape she couldn't escape. Over the next few days, I observed. Emily's routine seemed subtly altered. Her morning coffee on the porch became a quick dash to the mailbox and back. Her walks with her dog seemed to veer slightly wider, giving my lawn a noticeable berth. When she drove by, her head was often rigidly fixed forward, or she would be conspicuously looking at her phone, anything to avoid direct eye contact or, more importantly, a direct gaze at my vibrant pink display. It was a silent acknowledgement of their presence, a testament to their effectiveness. She was avoiding them, and in doing so, she was acknowledging their power. But I wasn't content with mere avoidance. I wanted them to be an undeniable, inescapable part of her life. So, I began to subtly enhance the display. I added solar-powered spotlights that illuminated the flock at night, casting an eerie, yet undeniably cheerful, pink glow across my lawn. This ensured that even after dark, my statement remained visible, a beacon of kitsch cutting through the suburban night. I even found a few small, battery-operated fairy lights and wove them through the legs of some of the flamingos, making them twinkle softly, like a miniature, pink constellation. It was over the top, yes, but that was precisely the point. My own family's reactions were a source of quiet amusement. My son, initially curious, now simply rolled his eyes with a fond smile whenever he pulled into the driveway. "Still going strong with the pink army, Mom?" he'd ask, shaking his head. My husband, bless his patient soul, just chuckled. "Well, it certainly adds character to the neighborhood, dear. Can't say it's boring anymore." Their acceptance, their quiet understanding of my underlying frustration, was a comforting presence. They knew this wasn't just about lawn ornaments. It was about reclaiming a sense of self and standing up to unfairness. Other neighbors, the genuinely good ones, reacted with a mix of bemusement and quiet appreciation. Mrs. Henderson, not to be confused with the overly fastidious Mr. Henderson, who lived 2 houses down, stopped me one afternoon while I was watering my flowers. "Oh, I just love your flamingos," she exclaimed, a twinkle in her eye. "They're so cheerful. Our street needed a bit of a lift, didn't it?" She winked, and I knew she understood. She might not know the full story of Emily's betrayal, but she recognized the spirit of playful defiance. This positive feedback from others reinforced my conviction. I wasn't being a bad neighbor in the destructive sense. I was being a bad neighbor in the most harmless, whimsical, and utterly unforgettable way possible. I was creating a visual spectacle that was undeniably mine, a vibrant expression of my personality that Emily, in her attempts to control and condemn, had inadvertently unleashed. The flamingos weren't just a symbol of revenge. They were becoming a symbol of my resilience, a bright, pink testament to the fact that even after betrayal, joy and mischief could prevail. And I knew, with a growing sense of satisfaction, that this was just the beginning of my new, unapologetically pink reign. The flamingos, now a permanent fixture on my lawn, were more than just a static display. They were becoming a dynamic canvas for my evolving sense of playful defiance. My initial order had been substantial, but I soon realized that true, sustained petty revenge required a certain level of commitment and creativity. I wanted them to be a constant, yet subtly shifting, source of low-level irritation for Emily, a visual narrative that would unfold over time. My online shopping habits shifted, becoming less about practical household items and more about discovering new additions to my pink army. I found flamingos in different poses, one with a tiny fishing rod, another with a miniature surfboard, even a few wearing tiny Santa hats, which I immediately purchased, anticipating the holiday season with a wicked gleam in my eye. Each new arrival was met with the same quiet excitement, a new piece added to my growing masterpiece of kitsch. I started rotating them, moving them to different parts of the lawn, creating new vignettes. One week, they might be clustered around a bird bath, as if enjoying a pool party. The next, they'd be lined up in a neat row, as if performing a synchronized dance. I even bought a small, solar-powered fountain and placed a few flamingos around it, giving the illusion of a tropical oasis. The subtle changes meant that Emily couldn't simply get used to them. Every few days, there would be a new arrangement, a new visual surprise to confront her. It was a constant, gentle poke, designed to keep her perpetually on edge, to remind her of my presence and my unapologetic embrace of the bad neighbor label. The effect on Emily was precisely as I had hoped. Her avoidance tactics became more pronounced. I noticed her taking different routes when walking her dog, sometimes even crossing the street a block early to avoid passing my house. When she drove by, her car windows were often up, as if to block out the sight of the pink spectacle. Her rare interactions with other neighbors seemed strained, and I occasionally caught glimpses of her gesturing vaguely towards my house while speaking, her expression a mixture of exasperation and thinly veiled disgust. It was clear the flamingos were living rent-free in her head, and that knowledge brought me immense satisfaction. My own interactions with other neighbors, however, continued to be overwhelmingly positive. The flamingos had become a talking point, a source of light-hearted amusement. Children on their way to school would often point and giggle, sometimes even waving at the pink birds. Parents would smile and nod, some even stopping to compliment the creative display. It was a stark contrast to Emily's reaction, highlighting the difference between genuine community spirit and her narrow-minded perfectionism. I even started to notice a subtle shift in my own demeanor. The constant vigilance, the fear of being taken advantage of, began to recede. The flamingos were a shield, a declaration that I was no longer a doormat. They were a visible manifestation of my resilience, a playful assertion of my right to exist and express myself on my own property. The anger hadn't vanished entirely, but it had transformed into something more productive, more empowering. The go-to neighbor was indeed gone, but in her place was someone stronger, someone who understood that boundaries were essential and that sometimes the best defense was a good offense, especially when that offense involved an ever-growing, ever-changing army of plastic yard flamingos. I looked out at my vibrant lawn, a testament to my newfound resolve, and smiled. This was my revenge, unfolding one pink bird at a time, and I was just getting started. As the weeks turned into months, the flamingos became more than just a symbol of petty revenge. They evolved into a form of performance art, a living, breathing, or rather, standing, testament to my commitment to the bad neighbor persona. I wasn't just adding more flamingos, I was curating them, creating seasonal displays that would undoubtedly drive Emily to new heights of quiet despair. Halloween arrived, and with it, a new opportunity. I purchased miniature witch hats and tiny capes, carefully affixing them to a select group of my pink army. A few held tiny plastic pumpkins, and one particularly bold flamingo sported a pair of glow-in-the-dark vampire fangs. The effect was delightfully absurd, a whimsical blend of spooky and kitschy. Children trick-or-treating on our street shrieked with laughter, pointing at the witch flamingos and vampire birds. Parents chuckled, some even taking photos. Emily, however, kept her porch light off that night, a clear sign of her disdain for anything that deviated from her rigid aesthetic. Her house remained a dark, silent sentinel of disapproval, while mine glowed with the cheerful, pink light of defiance. Then came Thanksgiving. I found small pilgrim hats and tiny feathered headbands, transforming another section of the flock into a bizarre, avian historical reenactment. A few held miniature cornucopias, overflowing with tiny plastic fruits. It was utterly ridiculous, completely over the top, and brought me immense joy. The absurdity of it all was the point. It was a constant, gentle reminder to Emily that I was not going to conform to her unspoken rules, that my property was my canvas, and that her opinions held no sway over my creative and retaliatory impulses. The crowning glory, however, was Christmas. I had been planning this for weeks. The Santa hats I had bought earlier were carefully placed on every single flamingo. I strung battery-operated Christmas lights through the entire flock, creating a dazzling, pulsing pink and multicolored display that could be seen from blocks away. I even found a small, battery-operated speaker that played a loop of slightly off-key Christmas carols, very softly, just loud enough to be heard if you were walking directly past my house. It was a full sensory assault of festive kitsch, a beacon of unapologetic holiday cheer that screamed bad neighbor in the most delightful way possible. Emily's reaction to the Christmas display was particularly satisfying. I saw her one evening, bundled in a coat, standing at the edge of her driveway, staring at my house. Her posture was rigid, her hands clenched at her sides. She looked like she was physically pained by the sight, as if the sheer volume of pink, twinkling lights and slightly flat carols were a direct assault on her sensibilities. She quickly retreated indoors, pulling her blinds shut with a definitive snap. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. My own family embraced the seasonal transformations with increasing enthusiasm. My son would offer suggestions for new flamingo accessories, and my husband even helped me untangle the Christmas lights. The flamingos had become a quirky, beloved part of our family's identity, a testament to our resilience and refusal to let one person's negativity define our joy. They were a constant reminder that I had taken a painful betrayal and transformed it into a source of ongoing, low-stakes amusement. The bad neighbor wasn't just a label, it was a lifestyle, and I was enjoying every single, pink, ridiculous moment of it. The flamingos, in their ever-evolving glory, became more than just a personal statement. They inadvertently sparked a subtle shift in the neighborhood's dynamic. While Emily continued her silent, rigid disapproval, other neighbors began to react in ways that affirmed my decision to embrace the bad neighbor persona. It was as if my unapologetic display of kitsch had given others permission to loosen up, to find humor in the mundane, and perhaps, to push back against the unspoken pressures of suburban conformity. I started receiving small, anonymous gifts on my porch, a tiny plastic palm tree, a miniature beach ball, even a small, hand-painted sign that read Flamingo Crossing. Each item was a silent nod of approval, a gesture of solidarity from unseen allies. It warmed my heart, reinforcing the idea that genuine community wasn't about rigid adherence to unspoken rules, but about acceptance, humor, and a shared understanding of life's absurdities. These small acts of kindness, so different from Emily's venom, reminded me of the good that still existed, and that my actions, while born of revenge, were also fostering a different kind of connection. Children, in particular, were drawn to the flamingos. My lawn became a minor landmark, a point of interest on their walks to and from school. I'd often hear their delighted squeals as they spotted a new accessory or a rearranged flock. Sometimes, parents would stop with their kids, pointing out the different theme displays. A few even asked where I found some of the more unique flamingo outfits, genuinely interested in replicating the playful spirit. It was a stark contrast to the tension Emily tried to create, a testament to the power of joy over negativity. The most surprising development came from a few of the other neighbors who were known to be somewhat reserved, typically keeping to themselves. One afternoon, while I was out watering, Mr. Davies, an older gentleman who rarely ventured beyond his porch, stopped his walk and actually approached my fence. "Your flamingos," he said, his voice a low rumble, a faint smile playing on his lips. "They're quite something. Never seen anything like it. Adds a bit of life to the place, doesn't it?" It was a small comment, but for Mr. Davies, it was practically a declaration of enthusiasm. Another time, I found a small, handwritten note tucked under one of the flamingo's legs. It simply read, "Thank you for the smiles. Keeping pinky." It was unsigned, but the sentiment was clear. These interactions, these quiet affirmations, began to heal the wound Emily had inflicted. They reminded me that her opinion, her anger, was just that, her opinion, her anger. It didn't define me, nor did it define the entire neighborhood. The flamingos, initially a shield, were now becoming a bridge. They were a conversation starter, a source of shared amusement, and a subtle act of rebellion against the kind of judgmental, restrictive mindset Emily represented. I realized that my bad neighbor act, born from a desire for petty revenge, was actually having a positive, unifying effect on the broader community. It was a delicious irony, a testament to the fact that sometimes embracing your perceived flaws can lead to unexpected strengths. And as I looked out at my ever-growing, ever-changing pink army, I knew that this was a battle I was winning, not just against Emily, but for the very spirit of our street. The quiet war with Emily continued, a silent battle waged across our lawns, with my plastic flamingos serving as the brightly colored, unyielding front line. Her avoidance of my property became almost comical in its rigidity. If she saw me outside, she would immediately retreat indoors. Her car would speed up as it passed my house, or she would turn her head sharply away, as if the very sight of my pink army caused her physical pain. It was clear that the flamingos were a constant, irritating presence in her life, a visual manifestation of her own inability to control her surroundings or, more accurately, her own temper. My strategy was simple: consistency and subtle escalation. I didn't want to provoke a direct confrontation. The beauty of this revenge was its passive-aggressive nature. It was a constant, cheerful reminder of her baseless accusations, a visual "I told you so" that she couldn't escape. I continued to add new flamingos, sometimes just one or two, sometimes a small cluster, ensuring the flock was always growing, always evolving. I started placing them in unexpected spots, peeking out from behind a bush, standing sentinel near my mailbox, even a lone, brave flamingo perched precariously on a low branch of a tree, as if surveying its domain. The weather, too, became an ally. When it rained, the flamingos glistened, their plastic forms shedding the water with cheerful indifference. In the snow, they stood out even more starkly, vibrant pops of pink against the white landscape, a defiant splash of color in the monochrome winter. I even considered adding tiny scarves and earmuffs for the colder months, but decided against it, wanting to maintain their classic, slightly absurd aesthetic. Emily's reactions, though silent, were palpable. I'd occasionally catch her staring from behind her curtains, her face a mask of frustration. Once, I saw her talking animatedly to another neighbor, gesturing wildly towards my house. The other neighbor, a kind elderly woman named Eleanor, later stopped me while I was getting my mail. "Emily was just telling me about your decorations," Eleanor said, a slight smile playing on her lips. "She seems quite bothered by them." Eleanor paused, then leaned in conspiratorially. "I think they're rather charming, dear. A bit of fun never hurt anyone." Her quiet support was a powerful antidote to Emily's negativity. The flamingos had truly transformed my relationship with the neighborhood. What started as a personal act of defiance had blossomed into a shared, unspoken joke with many of my neighbors. They were a conversation starter, a source of light-hearted banter, and a subtle symbol of resilience against the kind of petty negativity that Emily embodied. I realized that by embracing the bad neighbor label, I had inadvertently become a better neighbor to everyone else, fostering a sense of camaraderie that transcended the superficial. The revenge wasn't about inflicting pain. It was about reclaiming my peace. Each flamingo I placed, each new accessory I added, was a step further away from the hurt and betrayal. It was an act of self-care, a way to channel my frustration into something creative and amusing. The joy I felt in my garden, once shattered, had slowly been pieced back together, adorned with a healthy dose of pink plastic. I had found a way to turn a negative experience into a positive, albeit slightly absurd, expression of self. And as I looked out at my ever-growing, ever more flamboyant flock, I knew that this was a battle I was winning, not with anger, but with an unwavering commitment to cheerful, pink defiance. Emily's rage was her own problem. My flamingos were my joy. The ongoing flamingo saga had, surprisingly, brought an unexpected sense of peace to my life. The initial sting of betrayal had dulled, replaced by a quiet satisfaction that came from knowing I had found a unique and harmless way to reclaim my agency. Emily's continued, silent disapproval was now more amusing than infuriating. It was a testament to the power of a well-placed plastic bird. One sunny afternoon, as I was tending to my garden, a car pulled up slowly in front of my house. It wasn't Emily's, nor was it a familiar neighbor. A young couple emerged, looking around with curious expressions. They were clearly house hunting, and my street, with its mature trees and quiet atmosphere, was a desirable location. As they walked past my lawn, their eyes immediately landed on the flamingos. The woman gasped, then giggled. "Oh my God, look at these," she exclaimed, pointing. The man smiled broadly. "Wow, that's quite a collection. You don't see that every day." They paused, taking in the full spectacle, their expressions shifting from surprise to genuine amusement. The woman then turned to me, a warm smile on her face. "Excuse me," she said, "we're looking at the house down the street. We just had to stop and admire your flamingos. They're fantastic. They really give the street so much character." I smiled back, genuinely pleased. "Thank you," I replied. "I enjoy them." "They certainly make this neighborhood memorable," the man added, chuckling. "It's nice to see a bit of personality." Their reaction was a stark contrast to Emily's. They saw charm, character, and personality where Emily saw an eyesore and a sign of bad neighbors. It was a powerful validation, a reminder that not everyone shared Emily's rigid, judgmental worldview. Their appreciation, their genuine delight, was a far more potent form of affirmation than any direct confrontation could have been. It highlighted the difference between those who embrace individuality and those who demand conformity. As they continued their walk down the street, I watched them, a sense of quiet triumph swelling within me. They were looking at Emily's house, the one she so meticulously maintained, the one she believed was the epitome of neighborhood perfection. And yet, what they had remarked upon, what had truly caught their eye and left a positive impression, was my flamingo-filled lawn. The irony was delicious. This incident solidified my resolve even further. The flamingos weren't just about Emily anymore. They were about me. They were about my right to express myself, to find joy in the whimsical, and to define good neighbor on my own terms. They were a beacon of my resilience, a vibrant, pink testament to the fact that I wouldn't let one person's negativity dictate my happiness or my place in the community. The bad neighbor label, once a source of pain, had been completely reappropriated. It no longer carried the sting of Emily's accusation. Instead, it had become a badge of honor, a symbol of my refusal to conform, and a quiet declaration of independence. My lawn, once a simple patch of grass, was now a vibrant, ever-changing landscape of cheerful defiance, a constant source of amusement for me and many of my neighbors, and a perpetual, silent torment for Emily. And as I continued to tend to my garden, surrounded by my loyal flock, I knew that this was a victory far sweeter than any direct confrontation could have offered. The flamingos, now deeply embedded in the fabric of our street's character, continued to serve their purpose with unwavering, plastic cheer. Emily's reactions remained consistent. Rigid avoidance, furtive glances, and the occasional, barely suppressed sigh of exasperation. Her house, once a frequent destination for my shared garden produce and pet-sitting services, was now a silent, closed-off fortress, a testament to the chasm she had created between us. I, however, found myself increasingly liberated. The constant need to be the go-to neighbor, the pressure to always be accommodating and helpful, had lifted. It wasn't that I stopped being kind or helpful to others. Quite the opposite. My interactions with the genuinely good neighbors became more authentic, less burdened by the expectation of reciprocity. I still shared my garden's bounty, but now it was a choice, a pure act of generosity, rather than a perceived obligation. I still offered help when needed, but with a clearer understanding of who truly valued it. The flamingos had become a filter. They subtly deterred those who might seek to exploit my kindness, while simultaneously attracting those who appreciated a bit of whimsy and individuality. It was a fascinating social experiment playing out on my front lawn. The quiet affirmations from other residents continued, a wave from a passing car, a friendly honk, a compliment shouted across the street. These small gestures, once taken for granted, now resonated deeply, confirming that my actions, though born of a desire for petty revenge, had paradoxically strengthened my connections with the true heart of the community. One particularly memorable instance occurred during a neighborhood potluck, an annual tradition that Emily, surprisingly, still attended. I had brought my famous potato salad, and as I set it down on the communal table, I noticed Emily across the yard, engaged in a conversation with a few other women. Her eyes, as always, darted towards me, then quickly away. Later, as the evening wore on, a group of children, including some of Emily's own nieces and nephews who were visiting, ran past me, giggling. "Look, Auntie," one of them exclaimed, pointing in my direction. "It's the flamingo lady." They then began to mimic the flamingos, standing on one leg and flapping their arms, laughing uproariously. My heart swelled with a mix of amusement and quiet triumph. The children, innocent and unburdened by adult grievances, had embraced the flamingos as a source of pure joy. Emily, who was within earshot, visibly stiffened. She turned her back to the children, pretending not to hear, her shoulders rigid with disapproval. The contrast was stark, her rigid adherence to a joyless conformity versus the unbridled, innocent delight of the children. It was a powerful moment, a clear illustration of who was truly enriching the neighborhood, and who was merely trying to control it. The potluck continued, and while Emily remained aloof, I found myself surrounded by friendly faces, engaging in genuine conversations and sharing laughter. The flamingos, though not physically present, were a silent, cheerful presence, a testament to the fact that I had not allowed Emily's negativity to diminish my spirit or my connection with the people who truly mattered. I had found my peace, not by retreating, but by embracing my unique form of defiance. The bad neighbor had become a catalyst for a more authentic, more joyful existence, and I wouldn't have it any other way. As the seasons continued their cycle, so too did the evolution of my flamingo army. Each holiday, each change in weather, presented a new opportunity for creative expression and, by extension, a fresh dose of subtle irritation for Emily. Valentine's Day saw them adorned with tiny red hearts and bows. St. Patrick's Day brought miniature green top hats and shamrock necklaces. Easter saw them surrounded by colourful plastic eggs, as if they were the proud guardians of a giant, pink nest. My collection grew, not just in number, but in variety, each new addition carefully chosen to enhance the overall whimsical absurdity of the display. The financial outlay was minimal, a small price to pay for the immense satisfaction and emotional liberation they provided. I often found myself browsing online stores, searching for the most outlandish flamingo accessories, a quiet thrill running through me with each new discovery. It was a hobby, a form of self-expression, and a continuous, gentle reminder to Emily that her negativity had inadvertently sparked something truly unique and resilient. Emily, for her part, maintained her silent protest. Her avoidance was unwavering. I never saw her look directly at my house, and any neighborly interactions she had were conducted with her back to my property, as if the very sight of the flamingos might contaminate her. It was a bizarre, almost theatrical, performance of disdain, and I found myself increasingly amused by it. Her rigid refusal to acknowledge them, to even glance in their direction, was the ultimate proof of their effectiveness. They were living rent-free in her head, a constant, pink presence she couldn't escape. The contrast between her reaction and the rest of the neighborhoods continued to be a source of quiet satisfaction. My lawn became a minor attraction. Cars would slow down as they passed, passengers pointing and smiling. Delivery drivers would often comment on them, sometimes even taking a moment to snap a photo. Children on bikes would swerve onto the sidewalk to get a closer look. The flamingos had become a beloved, quirky landmark, a symbol of the street's unique character. I realized that my initial desire for petty revenge had transformed into something more profound. It wasn't just about getting back at Emily. It was about reclaiming my own joy, asserting my boundaries, and refusing to let someone else's negativity define my life. The flamingos were a physical manifestation of that resilience. They were a cheerful, unapologetic declaration that I would not be silenced, that my spirit would not be dampened, and that I would find happiness on my own terms, even if it involved a lawn full of plastic birds. The bad neighbor label, once a wound, was now a badge of honor. It represented my refusal to conform to a narrow, judgmental ideal of suburban perfection. It symbolized my embrace of individuality, my willingness to be different, and my commitment to finding humor in the face of adversity. The flamingos stood tall and proud, a vibrant, pink testament to my transformation. They were a constant reminder that even from betrayal, something beautiful and wonderfully absurd could emerge. And as I looked out at my ever-growing, ever more festive flock, I knew that this was a battle I had unequivocally won, not with anger, but with an unwavering commitment to cheerful, pink defiance. The culmination of my flamingo campaign wasn't a dramatic confrontation or an explosive revelation. It was a slow, quiet victory, woven into the very fabric of our everyday lives. Emily's reaction, or rather, her determined lack of reaction, became a predictable rhythm, a silent acknowledgement of her defeat. She never once approached me, never sent another angry message. The flamingos had, in essence, created an invisible, pink barrier between us, a boundary she dared not cross. I, on the other hand, felt completely unburdened. The weight of being the go-to neighbor, the pressure to maintain a perfect, approachable facade, had lifted entirely. I was free to be myself, to express my quirks, and to interact with my community on my own terms. The genuine connections I had fostered with other neighbors grew stronger, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared amusement rather than obligation. The anonymous gifts of flamingo accessories continued, small tokens of solidarity that brought a smile to my face every time. The most profound shift, however, was internal. The initial hurt and anger that had fueled my revenge had dissipated, replaced by a quiet contentment. The flamingos were no longer just about Emily. They were about me. They were a testament to my resilience, a physical manifestation of my ability to transform negativity into something whimsical and empowering. They reminded me that even when faced with betrayal, I could choose joy, choose defiance, and choose to define my own narrative. One ordinary morning, as I was enjoying my coffee on the porch, watching the sun glint off the dozens of pink forms on my lawn, I saw a for sale sign being hammered into the ground in front of Emily's house. My heart gave a little jolt. It wasn't a feeling of triumph, not exactly, but more a quiet sense of closure. The battle, it seemed, was finally over. I watched as real estate agents came and went, as potential buyers toured the house. I wondered if the flamingos played a part in their decision-making, if they were seen as a quirky charm or an unbearable nuisance. I never found out directly, but I did notice that every single person who walked past my house paused, looked, and usually smiled or chuckled at my pink army. A few weeks later, a moving truck pulled up to Emily's house. I watched from my window as furniture was loaded, boxes were carried out. Emily herself moved with a hurried, almost frantic energy, never once glancing in the direction of my house. There was no farewell, no last word. Just a silent, swift departure. As the moving truck pulled away, leaving Emily's house empty and quiet, I walked out onto my lawn. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden glow over the neighborhood. My flamingos stood tall and proud, their pink forms vibrant against the deepening twilight. They had served their purpose. They had helped me heal, helped me reclaim my space, and helped me redefine my place in the community. The bad neighbor label, once hurled at me as an insult, had become a catalyst for profound personal growth. I was no longer the go-to neighbor out of obligation, but a genuinely happy, authentic member of my community, surrounded by those who appreciated me for who I was, flamingos and all. The revenge had been petty, yes, but its outcome was anything but. It was a story of reclaiming joy, of finding strength in defiance, and of turning a betrayal into a vibrant, pink triumph. The street was quiet now, but my lawn, with its cheerful, kitschy army, hummed with the silent symphony of a battle won.